Alright guys, here we are. It is now time to review episode 7 of The Acolyte. As always, spoilers because we're going to deep dive into this, so spoiler warning for anyone who may have an interest in watching this show. And I always gotta lay it out at the beginning of the episode because I don't want to get lumped in with the people who are trashing this show for the wrong reasons. The actors are doing a fine job with what they have. Again, the overall issue with this show is the writing, the pacing, the direction. And as you can see, I'm pretty worn out dealing with this, especially this episode. Let's just go ahead and get on into it. Let's go. So this episode starts off with I'm just playing it. It's a backstory episode. It's another backstory episode. We're going all the way back to an episode we already watched and didn't really care for and didn't really like. Only this time we get to sit through it again through the perspective of Soul. Oh man, so at least on one hand, this rant is not going to take as long because we've already seen all this stuff happen, but the little stuff they threw in here just from Soul's perspective just makes the show terrible. Even worse is that they introduced Soul as a competent Jedi Master when we meet him. But now, in this episode, he gets revealed to be a creeper and a child stalker. That's pretty much the long and short of it. This episode is basically Soul over-obsessing about an 8-year-old girl he barely met for a few seconds. I mean, this episode was basically character assassination of Soul. He was the character that we thought was doing the best job, and now in this episode, they just assassinate him completely. Make him the weirdest person in the entire show. And there's so many ways they could have gone about the backstory to make it more interesting. I feel like the whole witch thing was a little much, but this just wow. But let's get into it. So this episode from their perspective is pretty much them on this planet just on a mission to try to find whatever they can find. They've been on here for weeks and haven't found nothing, and yet are still searching for absolutely no reason. It doesn't really bring in too much context as to why they're there. You know? Like, usually if you go to a planet, you're not finding much of any life, there's nothing really going on to be concerned about, you just pack it up and leave. But no, they're sitting there, apparently already weeks in, or like a month in or something like that, and they just want to be there. All except for Master Torben. Oh, excuse me. At this time, Padawan Torben is sitting here antsy, wanting to find any excuse to be able to go home, which becomes a weird plot point to the episode. Very odd at the direction this takes. So things really kick off when we see Soul discovering Osha and May. From the perspective on the previous episode, he was just kind of following them, and we was like, why is he following them? Now we know why. Because he discovered them randomly and was too curious, too creepily curious to just let it be. He had to follow them and find out what they were doing here and what was going on and why these girls are out here, and felt something mysterious going on, just had to investigate. Weird. I'm sorry. It's just too weird how they're doing this. So he becomes, right from jump, obsessed over the twins right in the beginning. And so after spying on them and following them back to their home, he watches as the witches are training the girls using the Force. Excuse me, the thread. And I don't have a problem with the whole thread thing as just a joke, but because different Force groups see the Force in different ways and call it different things, that's fine. It was the way they was trying to describe it and then contradicting themselves at the same time while they were describing it. But here, now we get to see what makes this scene even worse. Now Master Soul is watching this happen, and he's freaking out internally because he thinks that they're going to do something terrible to the girls. First of all, how does seeing them do force push training indicate something terrible is going to happen to them? And second of all, why is he so concerned about somebody else's kid? Again, this entire episode paints him as a creeper. And so he goes back and tells the others about it and how he just needs to do something. Like, it's not even just like, hey, I found some witches that seem to be using the Force. Let's make contact with them and see what they're all about. No, he's literally like, These girls are in danger. I just know it. I know these witches can't be trusted. They're gonna do something. I just know it. I can just feel it. Like, dude, chill. Like, really, the entire episode I was looking at him like, Soul, chill out, man. You're looking like something that we've been calling Drake these days. And so, because Soul can't stop talking about these girls, he ends up eventually talking the group into investigating the situation. And now we get to the scene where they actually make contact with them, but now we get to see this from the perspective of what happened to Torben, which is really weird because this is supposed to be Master Soul telling his version of what happened, or his truth, but now we get to see the inner workings of what was going on in Torben's mind when the witch mother was messing with him. That's another thing that's bugging about this. It's like, for those of you who love Dragon Ball Z, and more importantly Dragon Ball Z Abridged, the quoted line from Dragon Ball Z Abridged: how'd you know about the parts you weren't there for? How is Master Soul telling his truth and is able to detail what was going on in Torben's mind when he was being messed with? And I mean, it'd be something where he was like narrating, was like, oh, they messed with his mind. They just kind of like showed him get taken over. But no, we get a whole detailed scene of dialogue, watches in his mind, messing with him and everything else, as if it was Torben telling the story. So that was weird that we got this whole drawn out scene when it's supposed to be Soul's perspective. But moving on, considering everything else that happened, we already saw in another episode. So it's like, normally when you do this kind of thing, you show plenty of what was not shown before. In this one, I feel like they were showing a lot of what we already saw, with just little nuggets of what they hid from us, which made this episode exhausting to watch. We get to see more of Soul's obsession because he continuously cannot shut up about how he's worried about them, and now he can feel it. He can feel that Osha needs to be his Padawan, even though they're telling him, okay, she's too old, that's against the JEDI rules. At least they got that by this episode. It took you this entire time to finally get to the point to finally acknowledge that she was too old to be taken to the temple. And even then, with how the story is going, that still doesn't justify the idea of the council saying yes to her being trained. Still, at the end of the day, you're trying to save it. You can't save it. It still doesn't make sense. But his over-obsession over her makes even less sense. Like, they're trying to play it like it was a forced bond that he was feeling, forgetting that forced bonds don't work that way. Forced bonds are felt between both sides. And even though we see Osha saying that she wants to be a Jedi, we don't see at any point of her thinking about or seeing that she has felt a bond with Soul. Not even. In fact, in many cases, she almost seems apprehensive, and he's just telling her what she wants to hear. In this case, I feel like Soul is acting a lot more like a Sith than a Jedi in this moment. Like, what's going on here? And then after that, I just gotta point this out, we get the worst, fakest, and in many ways, most unsanitary blood sample collecting ever. Like, at least with Qui-Gon Jinn and Anakin, you saw him going through the steps, wiping his arm down to make sure it's clean, taking the blood sample, like you would normally do to make sure you don't, cause an infection while you're doing your work. In this case, nope, straight through the clothes. Straight through the clothes. We don't see anything really get extracted. It goes so fast, it's almost like her blood is just running like faster than water at this point. And no patch up, no nothing. Literally the fakest blood sample ever. And don't say, oh, it's mystical because it's Star Wars. No. We've seen it done right in Star Wars. I'm sorry, I just had to point this out because just doing things so lazily is the biggest problem in this show. Being so incredibly lazy. And next up, we get the test. They test the girls. Literally nothing changes about the scene other than an in-between conversation where Soul asks if he can try his own way of talking to Osha before she comes in. That's the only difference about the scene. Now, next up, we get a scene that's actually pretty curious. Not good enough to save the episode or the show, but just interesting. They find out that the girls are not just twins, but It's almost like they came from the same consciousness and were split. So yeah, more unexplained nonsense. But the unexplained nonsense is enough to get Torben to want to break protocol and command, considering he's the Padawan in this group, and he chooses himself to go out there and find proof of unnatural phenomenon and a possible virgins happening, just so they can finally go back home. That's all he wants. His whole motivation is to go to Coruscant, and he's willing to kick down the doors of these witches and start trouble just so he can go back to Coruscant. The logic is just lost, I swear. And then we get the blah 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 set up as the witches prepare for possible battle, and May locks Osha in her room and then busts the controls on their main gate so nobody can actually get in, and they all prepare for a battle because they want to fight the Jedi, even though the Jedi haven't really acted aggressive against them in that sense. Like, people are getting it was so weird to see everybody get so highly aggressive with each other for literally no reason at all. Like, everything that actually happens could have been easily avoided if anybody was using common sense in this episode. If anybody was. But we know who's not using common sense, which is Soul. Because after he chases down Torben, which he doesn't do until they get right into the witch's fortress, they decide, okay, let's go ahead and sneak in. And mind you, the excuse of his motivation was noticing that May had the witch's mark on her forehead, but Osha did not. And he was thinking that, oh, she might have rejected the mark and now she might be in danger. A whole bunch of assumptions, but completely forgetting that you guys were the ones who interrupted the ceremony in the first place. You didn't really think about that detail at all. Like, he is so obsessed over an 8-year-old girl that he has barely seen that he is throwing away all logic. Like I said, this entire episode makes Soul look like a creep. But everything else continues to play out how you remember it. The stone, I know there were theories about, oh, maybe the Jedi set that up where the stone was going to burn faster because of what, using the Force. So that's why the fire was moving across the stone. Nope, and nope. The Jedi had nothing to do with that. The fire still burned across the stone. It still caused explosions. The Jedi did nothing to influence that. So no save there. That part remains to be garbage. So now the witches are geared up for battle, even though their leader is trying to have a peaceful resolution to this whole situation. But Soul and Torben don't make it easy because they come busting in all authoritative like I don't know. They're acting more like police than Jedi in this scene. And I don't like it. I know, yeah, there's plenty of Jedi within the Order that have made mistakes, but this is just weird. The whole thing is weird. We have a Padawan who's looking to start trouble just so he can get permission to go home. I don't know how that fits, because if a real conflict was supposed to start, you wouldn't be going home. They'd be sending more Jedi to come back you up. So the logic there is lost. And Soul not just grabbing him by the shirt and be like, little Padawan, bring your ass back over here, and taking him back. No, he follows along with him because, again, he's obsessed with the 8-year-old girl that he's barely met. And I'm gonna keep driving that home, because anybody who tries to think that that's not what's happening here, I'm sorry, that's what's happening here. That's what makes it so bad. And then because nobody is actually listening to the people who are in charge, both sides are gearing up to fight, with Torben whipping out his lightsaber first. You're the instigator here at this point. And yet the funny part about it is that he actually doesn't end up doing anything. He doesn't. Like, he defends himself against some arrows that get shot at him. But other than that, Torben still doesn't do anything. You know who does do something? Master Soul. For no reason at all, she starts doing her witch magic to try and disappear and take May with her. And he's like, you're not going to take my 8-year-old Padawan. No. I found her. I want her. And just stabs her. I'm sorry, but literally this entire episode just turned Soul into a Sith. That's basically what he did here. He became a Sith at this moment, in my mind. Actually, he became something worse than the Sith. He became something so much worse. For those of you who've been watching our reactions and everything, I'll just say it like this. Soul, he ain't like us, not like the rest of the Jedi. Oh man, why did they even write it like this? Like, there's so many ways they could have wrote this tragedy, and it could have been something to where, oh, it was a mistake on our part. This is not a mistake. You deliberately stabbed her because she started to try and use her magic to disappear and get away from y'all. And I guess you could use the excuse that, oh, he was kind of freaked out in that moment and he just acted on instinct. But again, is that really something the Jedi Master would do? Why is he ranked at all? He definitely doesn't act like a Jedi Master or a Jedi at all at this point. Like, it's just terrible. It's terrible. I don't even know what to say at this point. And now they're fighting, and now all of a sudden Soul doesn't want to fight anymore because he's like, what have I done? I killed their mother, in his mind and everything, I guess. But you know, you could have easily just not done that. Like, again, your reasoning, or the reasoning that's displayed here, makes no sense whatsoever. There was nothing threatening happening. And as a trained Jedi, you should have been able to read the room and know that it wasn't an attack on you. But then we get more lore breaking stuff. The witches collect together as a group and use their powers as one. The power of many, I guess, to take over the Jedi Wookiee's mind and have him fight Soul and Torben. Now, here's the problem with this when it comes down to Star Wars lore. And then we're going to get to just writing lore after that. So Star Wars lore, taking over a mind as a group doesn't work like that. Taking over somebody's mind is something that you can only do to the weak-willed. It's not something that you're supposed to be able to do to a Jedi Master. All right? First of all. Second of all, it's already been well established that when you group together and attack somebody's strong mind, you don't really take it over, but you have a good chance of shattering it. It's more like torture than anything else. So why is it we have them flawlessly puppeteering our Wookiee Jedi and we're not breaking his mind? Okay, that's the foul number one of just going in your own direction. Foul number two happens when Indara shows up, because she shows up to help them. Obviously, she pins the Wookiee to the ground and starts fighting against the witches to free his mind, which is, again, weird. They've power scaled her way high in here because she overpowers the entire group of witches that the Wookiee Jedi could not. Not only are they doing something to him that should not be capable of being done or shouldn't work the way it's working, now we have Indara showing that she's OP, at least in this moment, and breaks their hold, which again makes no sense now because we go back to the opening scene and she's beaten by someone who she should not get beaten by and was unable to see her trickery. She was able to fight off a team of witches in a battle of minds, but she could not predict a second knife. Okay, but the real party foul comes from when she actually frees the Wookiee Jedi's mind, because by freeing his mind and breaking their hold, all of the witches died. All of them. They all died from being kicked out of somebody else's mind. I'm sorry. Not only has this not happened in Star Wars ever, when invading somebody's mind, from what I've seen. If you guys know a good example, show me, because I haven't seen it. But also across the board in every type of like show with psychics and psychic abilities and everything, when a group of psychics are, you know, fighting for control over a mind, and if all they're doing is pushing somebody out, they don't die from it. You can attack somebody's mind and destroy them and turn them into a vegetable, but if all you're doing is pushing them out of somebody else's mind, which is all we actually see here, there's no context to say that Indara did some special trickery with the Force and attacked their minds. None of that was displayed here. All that was displayed is that she pushed them out of the Wookiee Jedi's mind. And in doing so, they died. I've never seen that happen in any depiction of psychics fighting for control over a psychic space. If you're just pushing them out, then that's literally all you're doing. So the idea that they're responsible for killing all these witches, the way they died, is stupid. Just stupid. Oh, I lost control of the Wookiee. Sorry, no, that's dumb, okay? I'm just flat out, that's dumb. The way they died is dumb. I just gotta call it out like that. And then we see here a very pointless modification to the scene with May and Osha, where they're on the broken railing and May ends up falling. You find out that Soul was trying to hold them both up and was too weak to hold both railings up and decided to only hold up Osha's railing and let May fall. He intentionally and consciously sacrificed May because of how obsessed he was with Osha. Literally, even in the scene where he's trying to be the desperate last minute hero, he still gives off extreme creeper vibes. And then proves he's not even that strong as a Jedi in this moment, because he's not even able to hold up her railing using all this focus. He has to run up and grab her hand. That's the reason why, and that's terrible. Like, the first depiction in the first episode depicted like he got there at the last moment and caught her hand. That was way better than he sacrificed May and still couldn't save Osha, and with the Force, mind you, and then had to run over and grab her hand before she fell to her doom, or presumed doom, because, you know, May survived. And then now they're all back, feeling like a bunch of idiots for what they've done. Which Torben, even though he was definitely disruptive, he actually didn't end up killing anybody. Which kind of makes his suicide kind of weird now, because it was like you really didn't do anything but become a nuisance, and technically the Mother Witch attacked your mind first, so that kind of sent you on that trail. But the real person, the real culprit behind this whole thing is Soul. He was over obsessed over an 8-year-old girl. He freaking stabbed her mother at a moment's notice. He was completely out of control and should have been expelled from the Jedi Order. But that doesn't happen, because even though he was going to confess his crimes, Indara decides, no, I'm not going to let that happen to you. You're too good of a Jedi for this. We're just going to lie to the council and sweep this under the rug, and we'll talk the council into letting you train her as your Padawan. You go on a mission with me and you mess up this bad? Yeah, you need to go. You don't need to be a Jedi. But the fact that she kept a secret for him, that they all kept a secret together, they all should have been kicked out of the Order. None of them are no longer Jedi, as far as I'm concerned. They have all fallen. This is a story about fallen Jedi trying to cover stuff up, basically, and now they're getting bit in the ass. Which would make for a decent story if the actual pacing and plot wasn't so terrible and just all over the place. But yeah, that's pretty much how this episode ends. It was mostly from Soul's perspective, even though we got to get in Torben's mind for a hot second. And yeah, Torben is now a weirdo creep who became obsessed over an 8-year-old girl that he had barely even met. That's the angle that the Acolyte has now taken. Well, that's where it is. And again, there's no actually, forwarding of the plot here, because once again, the entire episode was backstory. To make this episode even worse, the entire episode was an episode we had already seen, but just with a few extra scenes that they left out the first time. All in all, this is truly a candidate for worst episode ever. And I say candidate because the other episodes have been really bad too. But I don't know what to say about this one. Now we're down to only having one episode left, and we don't have enough runtime to really push the story forward the way the story should be pushed forward. So I'm thinking that they're thinking that we're gonna want a season 2. I really don't. I want this next episode to just go by and end it all. Hopefully they just all kill each other in some random clash and just be done with it, and the council never finds out, and just sweep it under the rug and we forget about it forever. Okay, that's what I'm hoping for the ending of this. But overall, this is just but all right, you know what time it is. It's your turn. Let me know in the comments what you guys thought about this episode, how you guys feel about the truth about what's going on here, how you guys feel about this episode overall, how you guys feel about the show overall. Let me know in the comments, and I will see you guys next week for the next one. So till then, take care of yourselves. May the force be with you. I'm out of here.